Thank you, Mary Fashik, for joining us. Your podcast, Upgrade Accessibility, is one of my favorite sources of information and just entertainment. And I'm so glad that you're part of the festival. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm very, very happy to be joining you today. And for your listeners and viewers, I would like to give a brief visual description of myself. I
Yes,
am
oh,
a
please.
I am a Lebanese woman with short, dark, curly hair. I'm wearing glasses, a yellow top. I'm speaking into a black microphone, and I'm wearing black headphones.
And I am um, I don't know what I am, a dark white woman. I'm an Italian American woman with darker skin, darker hair, pulled back into a ponytail, an orange scarf, and a pink shirt, and I'm also wearing glasses. So, can you tell us how you started Upgrade Accessibility? Like, what's your background in production, and did you have that already, or did you kind of get the idea to start it and then develop that background?
So, upgrade accessibility, I want to clarify, upgrade accessibility is the disability justice movement that I started almost 4 years ago now, and it was to focus on the lack of accessibility for those who are disabled and the fact that accessibility itself needed an upgrade because we are still stuck in 1990 when the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed. So
Absolutely.
when I started Upgrade Accessibility in August of 2018, it was just a hashtag. It was some observation I had made. And then in January of 2019, after having my access needs denied and which caused me to have an accident that caused permanent injury on top of my disability, on top of my chronic illness. I decided to take all my anger and all my frustration and take my hashtag and create it into a movement. And that's exactly what I have done.
Yes, you
And I
have.
talk a lot about disability justice and disability rights and intersectionality. And people told me for years, you should like do a YouTube series or start a podcast.
Yes.
And I was very hesitant to do so because of my impaired speech, because I have been mocked for my impaired speech my whole life.
Sure. Sure.
And it was very intimidating. I actually created my podcast, I want to say about 9 months before I actually decided to go through with it because I wasn't sure I could do it. I was afraid of how people would receive the podcast and perceive the podcast.
Yes.
And so in the summer prior to starting a podcast, I held a roundtable called The Politics of Disability.
I remember that. You still
Because
do annually, no?
I do different roundtables. And I did that because disability is inherently political. And when I thought about a name for my podcast, I was like, that's the best name for it. The politics of disability.
Yes.
Because we're going to cover every aspect of disability. How is it political? And the three things I say at the end of my podcast of every episode is disability is messy, disability is political, and disability is not palatable nor does it have to be. And that sums up my
Hmm.
podcast. We
Yes.
talk about the politicalness of disability. We talk about how messy disability is, the nuances of disability and disability rights, disability justice. And we talk about how disability is not tolerable and that it's okay that it's not tolerable. I
Yes.
always say, if I make you uncomfortable, good. Then I know I'm doing my job.
Yes.
And that is how I came up with the politics of disability. I'm very pleased with the name, with the content, with the guests I've had, and I've had disabled guests because if we're gonna talk about disability, we also need to talk about how it is perceived by non-disabled people as well.
Oh, it's a human topic, right? Like all of us can become disabled. Many of us are disabled and don't even acknowledge it, so I think it's a subject everybody needs to talk a lot more about. And that's part of why I love your work. And I'm grateful for your work.
Thank you so much. It's something I'm very, very passionate about, and this is a podcast like no other. I wanted to make sure that those who don't have a platform, those who don't get listened to, are going to get listened to. And I've had guests that are non-speaking. I've had guests that are deaf, guests that are hard of hearing, and people say, "Well, how are you, a person with impaired speech, going to have someone who is nonverbal on your show?" Well, it's about providing accessibility
Exactly.
and platform. And I provided someone whose voice for the person who was non speaking. I provided the questions ahead of time. They provided the answers, and the person who voiced for them read their answers. So it was that person's thoughts and feelings just voiced by someone else. Simple. And I also make sure that every single episode that I produce and my producer produces has a transcript because we want to make sure that podcasts are accessible for those who are deaf, hard of hearing, those who have issues with executive or cognitive function,
Yes.
that listening to a podcast may not be accessible, but reading a transcript may be.
Yes, even auditory processing disorder. Like I always watch TV with subtitles because I can't. I just miss half of it if I don't. That's just how I have always been, right? So, and I have my own. I've been chronically ill. I'm autistic, so I fully appreciate what you're doing because even just kind of I don't know. It's helped me understand myself more, right? Like all of the work that you're doing helps all of us. Not even just getting more presence in the world, but also understanding ourselves. Like we've been left in a sea of ableism, and and you're trying to figure out where you're going wrong in life, but then when you hear, oh no, you're just these are some things you need, you have challenges that others don't, and no one's accommodating them, and hence this is why they're problematic, right?
The one thing that people in general don't understand that is that accessibility benefits everyone.
Absolutely. And what you were saying about like accommodating a non-speaker, my son's non-speaking, and it's just absolutely ridiculous how many people like put all of these restraints on him. We homeschool because we just couldn't find any schools that would teach him appropriately. And there's such minor accommodations to make, but you have to just be willing, right? You have to be willing to have this person in your class who you just don't think belongs there. And that's the biggest hurdle, right? It's not the accommodations, it's just the mindset of the people, the non-disabled people who just don't want disabled people around them. And that's really just heartbreaking that we're still in this situation.
We still are, I grew up Catholic. I'm no longer
Same,
practicing, but
same.
I grew up Catholic, and I taught for communion for many, many years. And there was a little boy in our parish that had Down syndrome. And I remember when I taught for communion, he was older than the second graders. I think he was in fourth or fifth grade. And his parents said to me, Mary, we wait for you to be teaching because we know that you'll know what to do or how to, teach him. And it really baffled me that it took a disabled teacher to take the time. And
Yes,
it
yes,
really wasn't anything extra that
no.
I did for him. He got the same work that everyone else did, and I made sure that he was not singled out because if we were going to what we used to call mainstream, when
Hmm.
I grew up, we call it mainstreaming. If we're going to mainstream disabled kids into a non-disabled environment, why are we making such a big deal? And this carries over into my podcast. We talk about the education system and how ableist the education system is. Even myself, I grew up in the 80s. I remember in elementary school, my elementary school did not have an elevator. So every year
Oh, same.
they will bring down one of the teachers, and one of the classes, they will bring it downstairs. We'd be outside in what we would call portables. I don't think they call them that anymore. That's how old I am. But, we'd be outside in a portable or whatnot. And in the summer, they refuse to bring down a classroom for me. So what happened to me in summer school? I would end up in the class with the disabled kids that have physical disabilities and not necessarily a learning disability. So I would do quote unquote normal work in a classroom with my disabled peers. But guess what? I never felt like I belonged because I was always around non-disabled kids, but I was too disabled for them and not disabled enough for my disabled peers. And this is something that I still feel within my community as well. And another thing that we talk about on the podcast is how having you have like one foot in the non-disabled world and you have one foot in the disabled community and you're not accepted by either one.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's interesting too because it kind of crosses over into like being a Lebanese American, like being an Italian. My parents were immigrants, and like it's a similar straddling of cultures that you're neither accepted nor rejected in either. So it's like my whole life is never really belonging anywhere.
That's mine too. I was adopted from Lebanon when I was 10 months old. I was brought to Miami, and the people who adopted me were Egyptian and Syrian. So
Oh
I
wow.
grew up in a Middle Eastern household, but I never learned Arabic. But we went to a church where the mass was in Arabic. So the Arabic I knew was mass.
Yes.
I knew the entire mass in Arabic, but outside of that, and maybe I would say some name of food, I never learned Arabic, so I never fit in with the other little Lebanese Egyptian kids at church because I wasn't noticed enough. And then at school, I always tell this story because to me, this is the epitome of how I grew up and not being accepted in either culture. I remember this blonde little girl. I think we were in fifth grade. She had a Bon Jovi button on her jacket. And I said, "Oh, who was that?" And she looked at me, she said, "You don't know who Bon Jovi is?" And I was like, "No." So I wasn't American enough in school, but at home, the woman who raised me always said to me, "Oh, you're so American."
Yes. No. Yeah. No. You never win. You never win in those situations. I had similar. Luckily, I grew up in a very immigrant-heavy neighborhood, so all of my peers and schoolmates were immigrants too, or kids of immigrants. So we were all clueless together. That was my only saving grace. But then when I went to college, I was like the weirdest person on the planet to everybody, quite frankly. So.
I mean, can you imagine? Like, I never saw a loaf of bread, so I went to like school because in our house we have what we call Syrian bread. Now
Sure. Sure.
everyone calls it pita bread now, but we call it Syrian bread. That's what I ate. I had never seen a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I didn't know what mac and cheese was.
Oh
Like,
God. I think my dad had it in for Chef Boyardee. He thought he was like a insult to all Italians. He was like, damn that man. I'll get him eventually. Like he hate so yeah, we didn't have any store, any canned or boxed food was not allowed. I understand.
it's so difficult. And that was, another thing that I was so excited. One of my guests on my podcast, they're also they're Egyptian. I'm also part Egyptian. And we were talking about this growing up in these dual cultures and
Yes.
how that crossover with disability and the expectation of us within our culture, but not really because we're disabled. So it's really just this process has just been like a wonderful journey for me and like really discovering who I am. I just turned 45 and like who was Mary Fashik at 45 as opposed to who Mary Fashik was at 25, who did not accept the fact that she was disabled, who
Yes.
did not like the word disabled, would never even think about saying the word
Yes.
disabled.
Yes. Same.
Um, and like realizing that when people ask me, when did you start advocating, and realizing I've always advocated, I just didn't know that I was advocating. But it's something I have done from the time I was a small child because society forced me to do it because no one else was going to do it for me.
Absolutely. And that's really just a sad statement on our society. But I'm very glad that you're pushing the envelope and now you've just started a new venture with respectability, is it?
It's diversibility and
Diversability, sorry.
yes, and yes, I am currently the community engagement manager for diversibility. Diversibility is a wonderful platform, and what we do is we try to um cultivate pay opportunities for disabled community members because we don't get paid for our advocacy. And we're trying to go against the current and make sure that those within the community are getting paid. And there is a Facebook group, and that is free. But I will say, we always have to invest a little bit in order to get a return on our investment. And
Yes.
if you join the Diversibility Mighty Network, if you join us, we have a sliding scale for those who cannot pay the monthly membership.
Oh, that's
And
wonderful.
if you have a job, we do have an employer sponsored membership as well. So there are opportunities to join what we call the DLC, the Diversity Leadership Collective. I
Mm-hmm.
highly recommend joining. It is worth the money. You do get paid opportunities, and you get to be in community. And one thing I have learned in the past almost 4 years now is how much I was lacking community and how
Yes.
much I
Same.
needed community. Community helped to shape me as a leader, as someone who wants to, like swim against that current and say, hey, this isn't right and this is what we need to do to fix it. So I'm very, very honored and very excited. I've been there right now as we record this. I have been with Diversibility for about a month now. It's just a wonderful way to, again, be in community with others, and not just others within the United States, but
All
from
around the world.
all around the world. We have members from Nigeria, everywhere, and just amazing. And we have monthly events, and we have fireside chats, and we have master classes, and we're going to try to open up our master classes to the general public so you can get a little taste of what we offer. But to get all of it, you need to join the DLC. And like I said, if you're unable to pay your monthly membership fee in its entirety, that's fine. We have a sliding scale application. We would love for everyone to join us.